Good afternoon, David. Thank you for joining us.
Hello, Sarah and Carlo. Thank you very much for having me in your program. It's
Yeah,
a real honor to be here. Thank you.
you're welcome. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear
Okay.
you well.
All right.
Thank you.
Uh, Thank you for joining us again.
So, should I carry forward with the presentation? Okay, so
Please.
thank you very much, everyone, for your time and for being here. I've been asked to give our thoughts about what's happening in the market, and so more than happy to do so. We've been given 25 minutes, and so I'll try to run through these slides as soon as I can, as fast as I can. So next, I just came from New York, and as you can expect, I got bombarded by so many people, both local New Yorkers and Pinoys, especially the Pinoys, but also a lot of these Americans who are very curious, shocked, dismayed about what's going on in the Philippines, and so I gave a campaign to in that trip in New York to remind people about all the good things that this government has done, because as you know, closer to election season, there's a lot of skeletons being brought out of the closet, and they think that this is a land of despair when it is not. And while I have been criticized for being for seeming to be overly optimistic to the point of being delusional or having my head in the sand, I think the facts remain that the property market continued to do well despite COVID. Yes, I am not blind to all the people who've lost their jobs, the distressed sales that have happened, the decimation of companies and the economy. I'm not blind to all that, and that's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is that despite all these things, the market and the economy is holding fairly well. It could be much, much worse, but it is not. And there are many reasons why this is so. So I've enumerated in the slide here all the things that this government has done well, that has benefited many people and the property market. So thank you very much, President Duterte, most especially Secretary Dominguez and Director General Plaza, because Secretary Dominguez and Director General Plaza have really held the economy together as we manage through this crisis. So the credit ratings, I think you're all very savvy investors. You all know why that's so important to us, and
Yeah.
we are one of 11 countries that the Japan that got a credit rating upgrade in 2020, and one of those ratings agency was the Japan Ratings Agency. Second, yes, this credit rating is now under threat, but so are many economies because of the way they have been ravaged by COVID. So that's not unique to Philippines. That we are just one of many countries that is subject to a review of credit rating because of the way COVID has affected us. And I
Yes.
think we should be able to recover from this much better. Next is the tax reform, which many people take for granted today, but that's affected 99% of all taxpayers. Prior to this tax reform, people earning 40,000 pesos a month get taxed 32%. And we've been able to adjust that so that only people earning 8 million or above are paying 32%. And the only way that was possible was because of the political capital of this president. Next is the reserve ratio requirement. That's unleashing 2 trillion pesos into the economy, liquidity that we are able to access without having to borrow additional money or receive foreign direct investments. Infrastructure, we're about to receive the largest infrastructure the Philippines has ever seen since World War II. 120 kilometers of roads and bridges completed in the last 2 years, and another 88 kilometers of roads and bridges in the next 15 to 18 months. And a lot more in the pipeline between power, other utility infrastructure programs, airports, roads and bridges and trains. And again, this is unprecedented. And a lot of people still don't realize this because they've been stuck at home and they've been prevented from circulating. But now, very soon, we're going to drive through many new roads. I'm very excited about Clark because Clark is going to be the big piece in the tourism puzzle that's missing. And I think that's going to open up commerce and tourism for North Luzon. And as you know, the Pampanga region has been fairly isolated from the rest of the prosperity that has been experienced by the Philippines in the last 20 years. But Clark Airport is going to open up and change the way people travel in the Philippines, and it's going to give a totally new experience for foreigners entering the Philippines. Rate has been pretty amazing. It's allowed developers to list very good tier 2 and tier 3 assets and priced as tier 1 assets. I mean, they're listing assets of this kind of quality at 5% cap rates. 5% cap rates for these assets are those are global first world pricings, and people take that for granted. Number two is that many of these companies were able to raise capital at a time when capital should have been scarce. I don't know how many IPOs have happened in the world through COVID, but I guess with the amount of money they've been able to raise at the prices they've been able to raise these at with 5 or 5.5% cap rate is surprising, and more listings are going to happen. And we've been able to borrow money at a time when most companies and countries find it very difficult to borrow money. And so we've moved our debt to GDP ratios very quickly from 39 to 60%. And let's just hope that the government uses the money wisely. And lastly, PEZA. PEZA has been the soothing, nurturing, I would say, the soothing, nurturing component of the government, because at the time when the BPO sector needed a lot of reassurance, the PEZA Director General was there to make sure that she held everyone's hands and said, everything's going to be okay. You don't have to worry about all these anxieties. And I'm happy to say that she's been vindicated through all this process and proven right. She's been validated through this entire process. And next. Because of that, the office market continues to grow, and I forecast that about 500,000 square meters of new leases will get done this year. Some of the biggest numbers that the world will ever see in any city. And yes, that is far from the 1.7 million square meters that we transacted in 2019. But we have to console ourselves with the fact that 500,000 square meters of new leases still get done. And number two, the rate of contractions of many companies have come down quite a lot. Okay? And it's been at the downward streak since third quarter of last year. Capital markets continue to hold. We continue to do record transactions in BGC, in Philinvest, in Alabang, in Cebu, in Makati, in Ortigas Center. There's very limited amounts of land for sale despite 20 months of COVID. And the biggest frustration that many buyers have is the amount of distressed deals. There are very few distressed deals in the market, which is a testament to how solid many of the property owners are here. And yes, there are a number of distressed deals, especially in the lower price segments of the condominium market, but that's more the exception. The general performance of the condominium market and the residential market is that from the middle market pricing and above, prices have been holding quite well. And I encourage people to continue to invest in the property market, especially through this COVID crisis, because COVID has not decimated the property market. It has only slowed down the appreciation of prices. And I think once we are out of this COVID crisis and we open the economy in a sustainable manner, you're going to see price appreciation go very, very fast. And I think the recovery will be much faster than what many people think. Next. This is just a map of the infrastructure projects, who they are, who's building it, what they are, how big they are, and the timing. And this is benefiting 40 million people, which is the domestic population of the geography in this map. Okay, this map is showing you 40 million people, and this 40 million people is driving 60% of the GDP of this country. And they're about to receive the biggest injection of infrastructure the Philippines has ever seen in 40, 50 years. Don't tell me that this will not have any impact to a speedy recovery. And I don't think many people have really factored the effect or impact of all these infrastructure projects being completed at pretty much the same time within a 4-year period. Okay, we're not waiting for each of these things to be completed in the next 10, 15 years. We're talking about the next few months. And in the last 2, 3, 4 years, all that these projects have done is accelerate the appreciation of assets and land prices all across this geography. Next. Next. And airports. So I talked about Clark, right? Clark brings the Philippines closer to North Asia by about an hour. So if you're coming from Hong Kong and usually take almost 2 hours to fly into Manila, to Naiya, plus an additional hour to 2 hours just flying around and waiting for your turn to land, plus the hour it takes to go through immigration and the other 30 minutes to an hour to get your bag, and the 2 hours to get from Naiya to Makati or Ortigas, well, all that's going to change when you start landing into Clark, taking that skyway to whether you need to go to Quezon City or you need to go to Ortigas or to Makati or to Alabang. And if you're not going south to Makati or Manila, you're going further north. You're about to drive in some of the best roads we've ever seen, because the drive up north is fantastic. We've got very nice roads, especially if you're going to Subic. It just changes the entire experience of foreigners entering the Philippines. And from Clark, you can access all the gorgeous beaches in the Visayas and Palawan. Okay? And all leaving on time, coming in on time. And you know what? The experience is going to be sustained, because when you land in Puerto Princesa Airport, Panglao Airport, or El Nido Airport, or San Vicente when it opens, or when you land in Iloilo or Cebu, the experience is sustained. You're landing in very nice, clean, quality airports. If you haven't been to the Puerto Princesa Airport or the Panglao Airport, I would so encourage you to do so, because really it is so inspiring to land in these airports. And if you don't relate to what I'm saying, just imagine, we've all been abroad so many times, and the biggest downer about our trip is landing back in the Philippines. You come from Narita, everything works, oh my God, the food in Japan airport, whatever, and then you land back in the Philippines in Naiya 1, Naiya 2, and it's such a downer. It's always such a downer, and you know that, right? But that's about to change for many people. Next is we've never had as many tourists and foreigners promote the Philippines the way we do today. And that's why we think that tourism will be the biggest industry of the Philippines within 10 years. Not only are all the international travel publications promoting the Philippines and the islands of the Visayas plus Palawan to be part of the top 3, top 4, top 5 must-see places in the world before you die, the most gorgeous beaches in the world, etc., etc., etc. But you've got so many foreign influencers now living here with millions of followers in YouTube and Facebook and Instagram who are promoting the Philippines and telling the rest of the world to come here. And they're not just white people. They're people from Korea, from Japan, from China, from all over the world promoting the Philippines. We've never had this kind of success, this kind of warmth and promotion that we have ever had. Okay, moving on to the office market. This yellow line shows you the total square meters transacted every quarter, and you can see that up until the last lockdown, last quarter, third quarter of this year, we've had a straight streak of leasing activity. It is temporarily suspended by this recent lockdown because I think, frankly, with 20,000 cases a day, everyone, both locally and foreign, got totally freaked out by Philippine COVID cases. And now we're starting to see a lot of that reverse. So now with the cases down, whether you believe it or not, right, there's one thing remains true, and that is those cases are significantly lower than what it was last quarter. And with the vaccination plus the new drugs that's coming out that's going to wipe out COVID, I think the economy will be able to stay open at a much, much, much longer time. And we may hopefully not have to lock down ever again. And that's just going to produce a much quicker recovery than ever. And we're seeing it again in the office sector because 200,000 plus square meters of deals still want to get done in the next 3 to 6 months from today. The BPO sector had a slowdown, but they've been driving demand. The POGO sector has been quiet for the last 15, 18 months, but that's a combination of the inability to bring foreigners to come and enter the country, and second, for all the tax disputes they've had with the Philippine government, but all that's been resolved. The POGO law has been fantastic, and next slide will show that. The next slide, this slide shows you the rate of contractions of companies by industry. So the POGO sector, the BPO sector, and everybody else. And you can see that the red line there is a POGO sector. They really gave up a lot of space, about 35 to 40% of their entire footprint in the Philippines. But today, they have stopped contracting. The BPO sector, yes, some companies contracted, but that's less than 1.5% of the total footprint they have in the Philippines. That's nothing. That's a rounding error. And most of those contractions were driven by tourism-related or travel-related businesses. And many of these BPOs are taking more space today. We are servicing the best, biggest brands you've ever heard of today, wanting to open 5, 6, 7, 10,000 jobs, new positions in the Philippines in the next 6 months. The beauty about the Philippine office market is that we have been insulated from many, many, many crises in the world because the BPO sector becomes our insurance against crises. When the world goes into crises, more companies open jobs in the Philippines, and with more jobs translates to more real estate. Work from home has been an issue for many people, and a lot of people have been anxious about whether that's going to decimate the office market, and I can tell you now that it won't. Everyone has got the mind to go back to the office, some faster than others. Some are experimenting into hybrid setup, but that's a temporary measure with the ultimate goal to go back 100%. And for those who are saying that work from home has been completely, absolutely fine, I think they haven't really talked to their spouse that much to kind of get real feedback from their spouse or their kids or their parents about staying home with them all this time in the last 20 months. Next. I keep telling developers, today is the best time to start the building and finish in 2024 because the supply is falling irrationally low. Everyone is hyper reacting to COVID. Therefore, they've cut down a lot of their projects, and therefore it's producing a significant deficit in 2024, 2025. The last time I saw office space levels this low was the period between 2004 all the way to 2008. Those years were the best years to be a landlord because every year you did, each lease became higher and higher in lease rates by 20, 30, 40, 50%. Why? Because of the scarcity of supply. And yes, there's a lot of supply available today, but that is temporary. Because when the demand normalizes, and especially when the POGO sector comes back, when they come back, and I think most likely they will, and I expect them to start taking new and relevant, credible, scalable spaces by second quarter, you're going to see all this space get wiped out. Next. Rents have really been hurt, most especially in the Bay Area, but we expect a recovery in a number of these cities. The hardest hit markets are the Bay and Ortigas because this is where the contraction of the BPOs are the biggest and the amount of new stock is also the biggest. The combination of those two factors produce a big drop in rents, but I think when the POGO sector reactivates, you're going to see a recovery then. This is how I describe the office market today. If you're PEZA, you should be fine. You should be really fine. If you are not PEZA and you are not in Bonifacio or Makati, then you will be hurting for another 18 months to 2 years. That 18 months to 2 year period will shorten if the POGO sector really accelerates, hyperscales. And I think there's a good chance of that happening again, second quarter of next year. Next. Property prices have done really well except in the Bay Area. And in the Bay Area, there are very few deals, and many of those deals are big deals. Big deals, tens of billions of pesos, and very few companies can transact those deals. And that's why we've seen a couple of moments where property prices have softened. Otherwise, everywhere else in the city, prices are climbing. Forbes, Dasma, Urdaneta, Sanlo, Bel Air have held their value despite COVID, and despite the prices, they have held value predominantly. You've got Green Hills and Valle Verde, Corinthian increasing in value. We've just done the record transaction in the highest price ever recorded in or done in Valle Verde and in Green Hills just a few months ago. We've just done the highest transaction ever experienced in Ayala Alabang. And these are not small deals. These are in the hundreds of millions of pesos just for land, bare, empty land. And we've just done the highest transaction ever in Philinvest City for a commercial property. We've just done the highest deals in Bonifacio. So again, these are not small deals. These are very large transactions. Next. It's a testament to really how deep the resources are of many people despite the havoc of COVID. And the REITs have done well, and it will continue to do well because of the pursuit for yields, and this is how prices have appreciated. And I think Robinsons and MegaWorld have done extremely well, despite everything that they've been set against. There are more listings to come. This is easily going to double. Next. Condominium market. This is how prices have velocity has behaved across different price points. And like I said earlier, the lower middle and the lower end have been hit very hard, and that's why there's been very low volume throughout the pandemic. The upper middle and the high-end market continue to do well up until the last 3 months, but they're recovering. The luxury market have pretty much behaved as they did pre-COVID, which is they kept buying assets. And I encourage people to buy assets now. Talk to condominium developers and land owners now and buy as much as you can, because today developers have been extremely flexible, and the moment we're out of this COVID and sales velocity climbs up again, and improve, you're going to see terms tighten, and then prices go up again. So use the crisis to take advantage of better terms. Next. And to prove that point, here is a summary of how the condominium market has behaved in Metro Manila. So again, I am not denying that there are distressed assets and deals for sale. In fact, there's quite a few. But I am sharing with you information from 525 different buildings across 100 developers and 290,000 units. And this is how they've behaved. Orange line shows you price of capital values, and the blue line shows you rents. And the orange line has been extremely resilient across a wide range of buildings and properties, despite a 10% contraction in the economy in 2020, despite a massive contraction in rents, where rents have come down by as much as 40-50% in some cases. And yet, prices continue to hold because of the strength of these unit owners. Next. Why do I encourage people to buy during this pandemic? Because we have been in a 20-year boom in the property market. 20 years, okay? And to stress that point, I'm showing you different condominium projects across Metro Manila by different developers: SMDC, Mega World Robinsons, Ayala, Vista Land. And when these projects got completed, what they were priced at before, during launch date and upon completion, and where they are today, and the CAGR from the time that they were launched. And some of these slower performing assets are doing 6-7% a year for a number of years appreciation per year, and some of these are doing 14 to 21%, okay, per year. And next, it's not just in Metro Manila, it's all over the country, okay. 5-6% per annum capital appreciation is the slowest these assets have performed. There is a crisis, take advantage of it. Take advantage of it, but please don't be too smart. Again, like I said, the biggest frustration of many buyers today is that they can't get enough distressed assets because there's so few. And many landlords have pushed back, many sellers have pushed back buyers and said, I am not selling at your price. This is my price, and meet it. I have lost so many deals, to be exact, 7 billion pesos worth of deals just in the last few months, because buyers kept chewing down the sellers, and the sellers kept raising their prices. Okay, there's a clear disconnect between buyers and sellers in the favor of the sellers. And I think very soon, those who tried very hard to negotiate good deals are going to regret that they didn't become more reasonable faster. Next. With that, thank you very much for your time. And if you, I understand there's a question segment, and we'd be more than happy to address those questions if you have any. Thank you. for your time.
Well, David, there's some questions. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Um, very, very specific. No, I mean, how can foreigners own or secure residences here in the Philippines?
So condominiums are allowed to sell 40% of the units to foreigners, and that's freehold. And you and I could take for granted freehold, but guys in Vietnam, in China, in Taiwan, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, a lot of them don't understand the concept of freehold, or the
Okay.
fact that they can own it forever within their family. Because in China, most of your properties you can only lease for as long as 50 years. Some 35, some 40. And
Okay.
here, to talk to them about freehold is just amazing.
Um, if we do relative value, David, let's say on the US, like let's say California property versus a property in Forbes or Dasma, San Lorenzo, Salcedo, uh, or even Singapore. If we do relative value with these other countries, are we priced properly? You think at the
I
current?
think a lot of people are scandalized by the fact that, oh, with $2 million, I can get this kind of apartment in this kind of city. And I go and say, well, you gotta be fair to these properties because they're not comparing like to like. They're
Yeah,
comparing Salcedo Village to I don't know, Queens. Or, why would I blow $2 million, $3 million right now in Punta Fuego when I can own, as much beachfront in Santa Monica? Well,
yeah,
you got to compare like to like. If you're talking about, let's say, Forbes Park versus versus the equivalent of Forbes Park in Singapore, I think the values are very far, right?
right.
If you look at Bonifacio, the highest transaction in Bonifacio is 1.7 million pesos per square meter. Done deals, okay?
Yeah,
And then like, oh my God, I can spend that same money in Chicago or something. But what's that compared to 15 million pesos per square meter in Ginza,
right.
or what? So yes, yes, there are some disparities, but you have to be mindful. You gotta compare like to like. The
Okay,
equivalent of Park Central Towers in New York is 10 times.
I see. Well, the question was really driven from, let's say, you know, owning like a beach property, let's say in uh, Northern California, uh, and then
California is a big place.
compared
Where
to,
specifically?
yeah,
Diba?
that's right. Okay, and going into the REIT market, David. I mean, what are your thoughts? I know you've explained that you've gone through it quite a little. What do you think of the capital markets at least opening up in the REIT markets? And
I think there's a lot of money that's chasing yield, and
okay,
then a lot of people are starting to appreciate. Hey, why do I need to own a condominium unit right now, uh, with all the hassle of maintaining it and all the taxes and dues that I need to pay, when I can just be part of 1 square meter, 2 square meters, 10 square meters, equivalent in owning REIT stocks with no
right,
hassle. I've had investors that say, "Hey David, what do I do with this money after I sell this asset?" And I go, "Well, you can put it in investments, or you can put it in REIT and earn 5% tax free. And they say, wow, okay, done. It's not a replacement for owning brick and mortar property, but
Right.
I think people have to have REIT stocks today as part of their portfolio.
Okay. Um, if we were to ask David, property is very demand driven. Uh, on the local end, what do you think? What is your picture of local demand versus foreign demand? Because of course, we rely on these or let's say an example, the POGOs, the BPOs, to maintain reoccurring incomes for these property companies, and also capital appreciation in terms of the property moving forward. Um, on the on demand on the local side, if we were to take out the foreign, what do you think is uh, the strength of our local consumer?
I think the fact that the property prices have not really dipped significantly
Yeah.
in in the high-end market is a testament to how deep the local buyers are, because the foreigners are not really here.
Okay.
Okay,
So
fine. You've got, a few, one guy buying 200 units,
yeah.
or one guy buying 100 units, or one guy buying 30 units in, Park Central Towers. I mean, yeah, but that's just one guy. I mean, we're not talking about hundreds of thousands of investors, foreign investors rushing to invest in the Philippines. There's no such thing. So the Philippines is really not in the radar of most people in Asia Pacific. And here we are so obsessed with trying to attract European investors and American investors and Canadian investors and Australian investors that are half a world away, when we've got 2.5 billion, 3 billion people, potential investors to the Philippines. Even just 1% of that traffic investing in the Philippines will flood this market, really.
Okay. I know, David. I know that you're a big. Uh, I actually look up to you to this because you're a big supporter of taxes. No, I mean, you're one of the best.
I
Also,
pay my taxes, and so should
yes,
everyone. Yes.
compliance and everything. You do your, and I'm really, that's something that I look up to you with. And what do you think of our taxation scheme here in terms of
I, I'm excited because
property? Um, okay, you're excited. Yeah. Okay.
I'm excited because now we have rationalized the income tax for individuals, right?
Okay.
So now it's normal. It doesn't make any sense to me how somebody earning 35, 40,000 a month is taxed 32%, right? Now that 8 million pesos and above, well, okay, 32%, okay, maybe we should improve that a little more over time when the per capita income rises. But right now, from 30% to 25% corporate income tax is great, but I look forward to the day when we're down to 20%, and then we're just slightly above Singapore, Hong Kong, lower than what it is in Vietnam and China, right? I
Yeah.
mean, that will be that, and that movement is going to dramatically change the ease of doing business in the Philippines. We just have to, I think, personal opinion, just get rid of capital gains tax and get rid of inheritance tax,
Yeah. I was about to say that.
uh, and uh, and dividends tax, to be honest.
Okay.
But also remember that the tax collection efficiency of the Philippines is under 18%, which means that we're not collecting 82% of the taxes that we should be collecting, because people continue to avoid and evade taxes, which is really a shame.
I have a question here, Dave. If I were to invest on a property in the Philippines, where would be the best place to invest, and where can I get the best upside value?
I think I think in investing I always look at safety and security. So it will still always be Bonifacio and Makati because these are the two most secure from properties from a physical standpoint. The best developers build there. The best tenants live in Bonifacio and Makati, and that's where the highest um, chances of you getting your space tenanted and not vacant for so long.
Okay.
And when you lose your tenant, there's a higher chance of you getting it replaced. Now, after all that, when you have enough of that recurring income, being able to build recurring income, then you can start doing land banking. Land banking is when you just buy property somewhere and sit in it for 10 years, and hopefully you sell at a capital at an appreciation.
And you're talking about the rural, a more rural area or the
Not
suburbs.
necessarily. I mean, you can buy land outside of Bonifacio behind the wall, which is what a lot of people have done. They've bought behind the wall of Bonifacio, and okay, fine. Just sit on it and uh, and uh, and sell it later on at a hefty premium if you get a hefty premium, and if you're able to secure the property because you got to make sure it's not squatted. You got to make sure nobody scammed you with the title. You got to make sure nobody takes it away from you, etc., etc., etc. You can go land banking. I mean, a lot of people have bought 10, 12 years ago in San Vicente. San Vicente was all the rave, and now everyone is his uncle who bought there are trying to exit that market, and they can't because too many sellers,
Okay.
and nobody wants to sell at a loss. So very few transactions. And then you've got all these dubious titles and all these other issues about ownership and transferring of titles. So all that combination makes it very difficult, makes it very illiquid.
I see. David, if you were to choose like brands, no, properties, there are different brands here. We have the big listed ones, and then you have secondary uh, developers who are also very uh, high quality. What would you say about, or what are your preferences in terms of uh, which brand of developer or
It's a very political. It's a very political
okay,
question, Carlo.
all right, all right,
But if I may, I think in my personal opinion, it's really Shangri-La that has brought the standard very high, followed closely by Rockwell, and third is Ayala Premier
okay,
in that order. And then part of the difficulty is that a lot of developers need to give. I mean, many of these buildings you can build in 3 or 4 years tops, right?
yeah,
But why does it take 7 years? Why does it take 10 years to build a building? Well, because they're all trying to, make it fit the monthly amortizations that they think the buyers can afford. And when you do that, when you do a project over 7 to 10 years, you're very susceptible to spikes in construction cost. And all throughout that process, in the next half, the second half of your construction cycle, the only thing you're doing there, apart from trying to finish the building, is re-engineer the building so that you end up downgrading the quality of the building, the finishing of the building. And then at the end of that 10-year cycle, uh, your building is compromised. And
okay.
so I think when that changes, when that mindset changes, then that's when you're going to see truly high quality, better value for money.
What is your view on the property industry in the MOA complex? If we could go into that area, David.
For me, it is the land of giants.
Okay.
It is a land of giants. So let the giants play in that area.
Okay.
When SM builds a building, they're not looking to build, 20,000 square meters of office space. They're talking about building 5 to 8 buildings, and each of those buildings are 100,000 square meters of space each. How do you possibly compete against that? You know,
Yeah.
when MegaWorld decides to build a residential complex in MOA, they don't do 400 units. They're talking 20,000 units over a span of 6-7 years. When Ashana says I want to build an office complex, they're not talking about 10,000 square meter per building. You're talking about 50,000 square meters, 80,000 square meters per building across 7 buildings across 8 years. And that's why when somebody says I want to build a hotel, they're talking 900 rooms, 500 rooms, 600 rooms. I mean, the scale is on steroids. And that's why I think it will be a very good market, because it will allow developers a clean canvas, but a very big canvas, to develop integrated properties, right? Which is very rare in the Philippines. Integrated properties like what you find in Hong Kong, where there is a Pacific Place. Pacific Place, we make such a big thing out of it, but actually it's on a very small geography. And there's so many of those types in the Philippines already. But you need a big canvas to do stuff like that. And that's the place for the Bay.
Okay. Um, uh, David, if with your own portfolio, with your way thinking of how to invest in the market, uh, more or less, you don't have to get into it. What does your portfolio of property markets look like? Um, so that we know what the pros uh, are
I'm
investing.
a boring stock investor. I take so much risk in my day job that I only buy safe stocks.
No, I'm talking property. Your property portfolio, David.
Oh, my real estate portfolio.
Yeah, your real estate portfolio. Yeah.
Yeah, same
How's
thing.
that?
I'm very safe. I've invested heavily in Bonifacio and
Okay.
Makati and Alabang. Those are the three, and El Nido. And I
Nido.
think of all the resort projects I've seen in the Philippines, the most sustainable one is the one of Ayala Land in Leo in El Nido. That, I think, has all the elements for it to be successful, not over a 2-3 year basis, but over a 10, 20, 30 year basis. I generally think that Palawan will be our answer to Bali and Phuket.
Okay.
Ayala will lead that. Ayala will lead that way.
David, how do you see the central Luzon, the Tarlac areas, being, these other provinces that should be developed, out of the NCR? What are you seeing? Are you seeing it in the south, on the southern Luzon area, or more of course, we have Clark already up north. No, where do you think is the next? Where are the developers putting their scopes on and pointing towards to?
I think Southern Tagalog is still very relevant because that's where predominantly all the infrastructure is happening.
Okay.
There's Clark Airport will transform Northern Luzon, and primarily for tourism, because you'd be amazed at how many people like to watch birds. You know,
Uh-huh. Yeah.
and by that I mean birds, the
Yeah.
dinosaur relative with feathers that fly around.
Right. Right. Yeah. Bird watching.
Uh, and that bird watching market is massive. Why
Yes.
aren't enough coming here to the Philippines? Because it's so damn difficult to get here. You have to fly into Naiya and then crawl your way up Northern Zone. That's all gonna change with Clark. Surfing. There's so
Yes.
many foreigners that live here that take the public bus on a
Yeah.
Friday night, and they
Mhm.
come back leaving La Union early Monday to be in time for work at 9 a.m. I personally know so many people who are doing that journey in La Union. And it's been fantastic. And Northern Luzon has got some of the cheapest properties you could ever find in the Philippines. And the coastline, we take that for granted. The coastline is very similar to the coast that you see in Australia, which is what? 50 to 70 meters of sand. The beach is 70 meters wide.
Talk
And
about
it stretches on for hundreds and hundreds of kilometers, covering the entire surface area of Northern Luzon.
yeah, like
And,
Aurora.
and, and, and to put it in perspective, Boracay, as much as we go so crazy over it, the coastline, the shoreline in Boracay is anywhere from negative 3 meters to at best 25 meters.
Wow, that's impressive.
And so I think Northern Luzon is going to have a fantastic ride. It will be the age of Northern Luzon for the next 20, 30 years. Of course, especially if the president is going to be a Marcos, I expect Northern Luzon to really flourish. But also, I encourage the politicians to start working on their properties, because the biggest problem of Northern Luzon, which is why it's so difficult to do business in Northern Luzon, is that very few people have actual titles, and there's so many scammers and so many land grabbers.
Okay, David, we're nearing our time period, and if there is anything you want to mention uh, to the general public, from the demographic of youngsters to baby boomers, Generation Z, and so on, uh, what can the best institutional brokers say about
I think
how
I
can
think
we wrap it up? You know,
yeah, I think we have had an amazing 20-year boom. Okay, the per
okay,
capita income went from 1,000 something to 3,000 something today, and in all likelihood, it's going to double in the next 15 years, if not sooner. Next is that we never thought today was possible, which is what? We've got the best credit rating we've ever had as a country. Interest rates are single digit low end, that a long-term mortgage market is about to happen, that that we are building 130 townships all over the Philippines outside of Manila. We have completed 16 new airports with another 30 in the pipeline. Half of those 30 are already under construction. Some of the best experiences we've ever had. Filipinos, 10 million, 11 million Filipinos, sending $35 billion to the Philippines, which is guilt money. Guilt money. They haven't brought in investable funds. They haven't brought in their savings. They are just padala pera sa Pilipinas, just so that they can say to their conscience, at least I helped my relative with his dental bill, or his tricycle fare, or his FX business, or his taho vending business, whatever. There, we are seeing more and more overseas Filipinos bringing in real capital, employing hundreds of people, starting their own business, building their BPOs and back offices here in the Philippines. And they're not hiring two or three of their cousins. They're hiring real professionals in the hundreds, investing real money. And they're not just doing that in Metro Manila or in BGC. They're doing that in Iloilo. They're doing that in Spring Valley in Tago, in Bacolod. They're doing that in Talisay. They're doing that in a number of places. You can't imagine all the very intelligent Europeans who have decided to live here permanently with their families. You can't imagine all the Koreans that are here still wanting to invest and send their kids here because it's the cheapest place to learn English. You can't imagine the inflection point of the data center market globally shifting out of countries because of their fear of the influence of China and how China will take over that information if they keep the data centers there. I mean, never before did we think this was possible. Yes, we have a lot of problems as a country, but we also have been through a 20-year boom, and in that 20-year boom, it has fixed a number of problems that we had. And the next 10 years, the next 20 years of the Philippines will be even better.
Okay. Well, David, again, thank you for showing us your presentation, and your inputs. Thank you for your inputs as well, and for coming here to the webinar of AB Capital Securities.
Thank you for having me, Carlo and Sarah. And thank you very much for being here, all of you who bothered to listen to what we have to say.
Okay, so thank you so much, Sir David, for the very informative presentation and answering all those questions. I guess that would be all for our webinar today. Again, we'd like to thank Mr. David Leechiu for spending this time with us, and of course to all our viewers. If you guys are interested in investing in REITs, you may open an account with us, AB Capital. Also, I'd like to invite everyone for our upcoming webinar titled Red Light, Green Light, timing your entry and exit using technical analysis. All right, so that would be all for today. We are hoping to see you all again on our next event. Stay
Thank you,
safe,
David.
everyone, and have a good day. Thank you, Sir Carlo and Sir David.
Thank you.